Roadman, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to one of the fastest time trialists on the British cycling scene, John Archibald. Today we try to unlock the secrets to going fast against the clock. We talk about pacing strategies, we talk about technology, wheels, tyre choice, drivetrain efficiency, aerodynamics, training regimes, and exactly how to fit all this in around a busy full-time job. John is ridiculously fast against the clock, clocking some sub 17:30 10-mile time trials, making him one of the fastest riders in the UK. I think you're going to love this conversation. John Archibald. John Archibald, welcome to the Roadman podcast.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
You might be the fastest rider I've ever talked to. Well, that's a few. That's a tough accolade. What's your 10-mile PB?
17:19.
Yeah, I'd say you're up there. You're definitely on a podium with the fastest riders. You're faster than Bingham?
I'd like to think so, but I've had my bet over him. I've had the best of him recently, but no, I think definitely his hour record and his IP times. He's definitely got some. If he was to come to a fast 10 now, he'd smash that time for sure.
Look, it's only as good as what you can put on paper.
Exactly, yeah.
The gauntlet set. My goal with the podcast for this one is somebody that's stepping into time trialing to give them a foothold on what it takes to be good at time trialing, or somebody who's already in time trialing but they feel like they've hit a bit of a plateau. And some of these questions are a little bit self-serving because I got a time trial bike just before the end of the season, and now I'm looking at next year's calendar going, I haven't done a 10-miler in about 10 years. I can't even remember what this feels like. I can't remember warm-ups. I can't remember pre-race meals. I even had a playlist back in the day. I'm so far from needing a playlist right now. So that's my goal. So we'll break it down and maybe start off talking about training. To do those sort of times, what's the training commitment? Because I know you're balancing a full-time job with this as well.
I think there's a training commitment and then there's what you're physically able to do. So I'm quite fortunate in that I don't have a wife and kids and a very demanding job or a physical job, manual labour job. So I'm able to commit something around 15 hours a week to cycling. And so that's just unrealistic for some people. But I think I also do that because I like to road race and do some other things. And because I enjoy riding the bike. It's not to say that 15 hours a week is the requirement or the baseline. So I think it's a case of some people do a lot better do very well off 8 to 10 hours. Or even if you stretch that up to 12, you're talking, that marginal difference of 8 to 12, that 50% increase is a big difference. Yeah. So I guess there's an alignment of realizing where you're at now and then what you can realistically achieve. And so if you're at 8 hours a week now and you go, okay, I'm doing these times, I've got this level of fitness, I can do this 20-minute power, hold the position this well for this long. Can I dedicate more time to it and can I recover from it? Because equally, when I was full-time as a professional in a sense, the amount of hours I did only went up to around 20. It's not like I suddenly started doing 30 hours. Because once I go above 20, 25 hours, I could do the odds 25-hour week, but if I start doing them consistently, I won't recover well enough to actually improve and absorb it. So I think there's that realization as well.
And I know you've those twin goals, you are balancing, still doing some road racing, but how focused on time trialing is your training? Is that like the main priority for you?
Yeah, so I see the road racing as fun. It supplements it, supports it. I get to, it's more social in a sense. So I enjoy doing the road racing just as a thrill, but it's not by no means a necessity or my season focus. So with the time trialing, I like to say, well, during the season, definitely minimum 2 times a week on the bike. If I was less experienced and initially when I was first getting into time trialing, it would be more than that. I feel like I've built up a bank of whatever you want to, muscle memory, whatever you want to call it. I have a bank now where I can get on the bike after weeks off of it. After a few weeks, I feel pretty comfortable in the position and putting out the power, the hip angle, keeping my head low, all the basic things around that. But certainly for the season, minimum 2 times a week, maybe 3. And then my structured sessions would always be on the intervals on the TT bike. I wouldn't be doing them in the road race position.
Interesting. So you're holding the position for the efforts?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I know some people like to take the attitude of, say, a VO2 interval where you're just trying to get that max aerobic capacity and you don't care. You just want the high breathing rate, the high heart rate. Okay, maybe I'll come out of the position for that. But personally, I've got a bit of a track background with the IP and things, and I quite like to do even the high intensity efforts. I'll do them in the skis. And there's that. It's just something you don't learn to do otherwise. So, for instance, when you're going on a 10-mile time trial and you hit a hill and you need to do 50 watts over your threshold to get over the hill, It's a VO2 effort. You need to stay tucked, head down, able to breathe, put out the power. And if you don't know how to do it, there's only one way to learn, and that's from training.
And will you ride the entire session in the position, or will you just come into the position for the effort? Say like a typical session is like a 2x20 threshold session. It's 60 or 90 minutes long on the indoor trainer. The 2x20, you're in the position, full tuck, head down. But for the recovery in between them and the balance of the session, which you're probably riding in zone 1, zone 2, will you stay in a position for all that?
So I would say maybe it's 75, 80%. I would say I get on the bike, start loosening off on the base bar, not worried about it. I mean, I'm not totally OCD about it, where I go right minute 1 in the skis, let's go. But basically, all available moments, I'm trying to be in the skis. So if it's a 20-minute interval and I come up for recovery, yeah, sure, 5 minutes on the base bar, then back in again. I would say if I was doing a 90-minute session, I would never spend more than 3 or 4 minutes out of the skis at one time. And certainly in the intervals, I wouldn't come out at all, because it's you're capitulating really. It's if the intensity is so hard that you have to come out the skis, then it's too hard.
That's fast. I hadn't realized you were going to spend, or you're going to say you're spending so much time in it. And if you go on a long endurance ride, is there a benefit to the time trial bike and staying in the skis for that?
I could see a benefit. It's not something I do regularly. So if I was doing a 4-hour endurance ride, I would take the road bike. So if I'm saying I'm doing my 2 or 3 interval, or my 2 interval rides a week on the TT bike in position, then my endurance rides, I'd ride to work, for example, I'd be on the gravel bike sometimes. So for that, I haven't focused that much recently on it. In the past, I have done. So I've done, say, a 3 or 4 hour ride on the TT bike, and I can definitely see a logic for it. I know there's other riders that do that, and especially if you're doing a longer time trial, something a lot of people manage to get away with a 10, for example, having not done that type of work. But once you get above a 10, you start going towards 25, people's glutes pack in, their lower back, things that you can only, well, your body can only put up so much. And so doing 2x20, once or twice a week in the skis isn't enough to support that. So if you're someone that's really fresh to the bike, then also the handling of the bike is another aspect where those long endurance rides, there's certainly a role for it there.
And do you supplement your on the bike training with off the bike training for, like you're saying there? I know as soon as you said that, I almost got PTSD flashbacks to my last time trial, which was probably 8 years ago, and my lower back's just been cooked on a 25 miler. Are you supplementing your on the bike with core work off the bike?
So personally, I've not, because it's never been an issue for me, and I think I'm lucky with that, because there's certainly other people where they cramp or they have lower back issues, or their neck, they really struggle their neck naturally. Personally, it's just never been an issue, so I've never had to do it. I mean, I've got, in terms of flexibility, I'm very poor. I struggle to touch my toes. Every time I climb the stairs, my quads feel tight. I'm not a flexible person.
You're a real cyclist.
Yeah. But when it comes to just tucking my head and putting out 400 watts and seeing how far it takes me, I've never. The only times that I have real problems is the longer time trials. Once you start going to a 50 miler, then I'm not walking for the next 2 days. But I don't think strength training would be the full answer to that, because it just seems to happen to a lot of people.
And you're saying you're kind of 15 hours a week dedicated to cycling. Is there off the bike tinkering that needs to be done equipment wise? Is that a constantly evolving process? It seems like anytime I'm chatting to someone, they're testing new cranks, they're testing new bars, they're testing new helmets. Is that time you're building into your week?
No, I would, if you want to take almost, I would consider that a side hobby. It's definitely part of the game, and you need to be involved or enthusiastic about it, or just genuinely like the chase of that, because it's ever evolving and it's never stagnant. You'll never have a setup where you go, this is it, I'm done, I've bought my dream bike and it's over. I can now just ride this for the next 5 years, because there's people like Dan out there just ruining the sport for everyone. But you can never sit in your laurels there. So personally, I have my eye out for things, and I've done loads of testing over the years to try and find those little gains. And it's frustrating, because you can also, with too much tinkering, you can go backwards. So there's the low-hanging fruit: your helmet, skin suits, tires, wheels, bike frame, covering your cables. All the things that are obvious to the eye. You can tick those off first, but then you get to a point where you go, okay, well, if I reduce my frontal area by lowering stack height and my saddle and moving things forwards and backwards, but then you realize, hold on a minute, I've reduced my CDA by this, but I can only put out 20 watts less than I was doing last week. You lose power, and so there's this balance that you need to be aware of.
So how do you find that balance? Like, do you find the theoretical gains in the wind tunnel and then test them real life in a velodrome, or using some real time thing like you were talking, you were using Aero sensor?
So I guess there's several ways you can do it. Ultimately, what you're trying to end up with is this what's the CDA equation of these are the watts I can put out, and this is the CDA I have. So if, for example, I know that my first 10 mile time trial I do 400 watts and my CDA is 0.2, I mean, you divide those numbers and you get a CDA value, and watts to CDA value. And you can either reduce the CDA or increase the watts to improve that number. And so that's a really crude sort of rudimentary way of looking at it, because there are other elements of, your rolling resistance, the air density affects things, the traffic flow, all these things have an impact. But if ultimately, when weight isn't that much of an issue, you're just either trying to increase watts or lower CDA. So if I go, okay, I've taken 0.1 off my CDA in the wind tunnel, and then I come home and realize actually I've lost 30 watts because I'm so well tucked and poorly positioned with my hip angle, I can't put the power out anymore. And that's a cruel learning process in a way, but you have to be testing things like your 20-minute power or your race representative power and how that's affected by these changes in your position.
This podcast is sponsored by Whoop. It's the world's most advanced health and fitness wearable. Whoop is the only wearable that actively coaches you towards your goals, and it shows you the impact that certain behaviours and habits have on your health. And right now is a great time to get started with Whoop because they've just kicked off their Sober October challenge. So why not give your body and mind a little bit of a reset with a 1 month break from alcohol? Sounds tough, but I can tell you it's not. Last year, Whoop members who spent 1 month alcohol-free experienced loads of improvements to their sleep, resting heart rate, variability, and loads more.
And I think the thing with that is you don't need to get started with your 1 month challenge on October 1st. It could be October 31st that you get started on your 1 month challenge. For me, like if anyone's listened to the podcast, I had a wipeout on the mountain bike about 5 weeks ago. Tore my rotator cuff, broke a bunch of ribs, and went into a little bit of self-destruct mode where I started out having like a glass of wine a night, and then I was like, oh sure, I'm not training tomorrow, I'll have 2 glasses of wine, I'll have 3 glasses of wine, I may as well finish the bottle. And it's like, what am I doing here? But when the Sober October thing came along, I thought it was an interesting chance to compare data from my Whoop in the period where I was feeling sorry for myself, in the period alcohol-free. And I'm actually shocked at the difference it makes. Even 1 glass of wine, the difference it makes to my heart rate variability, my restorative sleep. And then anecdotally, if you tie that data to how you feel the next day, it's insane. So if anyone hasn't experimented with this, I think you're drastically going to cut your alcohol consumption all year if you observe this data. Like Whoop have been good enough to give us a bunch of free months to hand out to listeners of the podcast so they can try this. So the link is going to be in the description below. I highly encourage you to go and try this and try drinking. Great excuse to drink. Try drink for a while, then use your Whoop to observe the effects on heart rate variability, sleep, resting heart rate when you're drinking and you're not drinking. So if you want to get that free month, it's join.whoop.com/roadman, and it's going to be in the description below. Try it and let me know how you get on. And you said weight's not an issue. Is it no issue at all, or it's like quite a trivial issue?
I think in your and I's experience, it was trivial because to make a substantial difference, you're talking 10 kilos or more.
Okay.
So, for example, if you say, "Oh, I know I could lose 2 kilos," and I might potentially lose some power with that, I'd go, "Not bother, don't bother. 2 kilos is going to make no difference in terms of your race time, because once you're up at 50k an hour, the overwhelming thing slowing you down is air resistance." But if it was a very hilly time trial and you're professional on the world tour, and you're talking 2 kilos, then can make a difference. But for you and I, doing your 10-mile time trial, I wouldn't consider it an issue at all. And so if I've got an option between choosing a heavier bit of equipment that's more aerodynamic, I'll choose it all day long. Or
but at 10 kilograms, it makes a difference because you're starting to shift the type of frame you have, and that's impacting your ability to cut through the air.
No, I guess I picked an arbitrary number there just because the scale of difference. So say I know when I was doing an individual pursuit on the track, a kilo, if I put on an extra kilo, it's worth about a watt for the 4 kilometers.
Okay.
And so if you get up to 10 kilos and it's 10 watts, then you're almost talking that's 2 seconds slower in a 4-minute IP. But I was just trying to illustrate the scale of the issue that, if you're 1 or 2 kilos, if you're worried about your diet and saying, "Oh, I really want to be careful not to eat that so I don't gain weight," and it's only a difference of a kilo either way, don't stress it because it's far too minuscule.
And also, like you're saying, if using that same individual pursuit analogy, if your weight's going up 5 kilograms, your time's going down 5 seconds, but then is that getting maybe offset by some strength gains with those 5 kilograms as well?
Yeah, exactly. And so, I'd when I was on the Hoop team, I had a teammate, Johnny, for example, who physiologically, we were very different. He was a very anaerobic rider, a bit heavier than me. I was a total diesel, maybe a little bit lighter. And we put out almost the same power in an IP, and we sort of met in the middle, just different ways of achieving the same thing. But I think you don't want to over-engineer the weight in time trialing. I would almost not disregard it, like don't go home and start eating all the cakes, but it's just not a real issue. You're far better putting your energy into the CDA element of the equation.
So when we touched on training, but when you zoom out and we think about sort of a macro overview of training, how important is it to be just spending time at or around race pace? How much do you prioritize that over, say, what a regular cyclist would, where they'll go through maybe, reverse periodization is quite popular. Someone might do a sprint block, a VO2 block, a threshold block, and then into more of a race specific block. Is that more occupied by you by just threshold blocks?
I would say so in my experience, but that's not for everyone. For instance, if you're a very anaerobic rider, I should say that the other way. If you're a very threshold rider, like I am, I do need some top end work. Otherwise, I will just stagnate at that level and not be able to push above it. Because ultimately, when you're doing a time trial, it might seem like it's a flat pace, but ideally there should be periods way above threshold and way below it. So you have to have that capacity to push above threshold. But yeah, I think what you outlined there of becoming more specific to the event as you approach the race, for sure. And the good thing about time trials is you can practice them very easily. You can go to a CTT website and enter one every week for the next 6 weeks, and do a very representative race, or rather a simulation, I guess, in a sense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to just necessarily peak for 2 time trials a year. I'd want to do some practice.
So I definitely want to get on to talking about pacing and sort of game day, exactly what your approach is to all that stuff. But let's just geek out on equipment for a second. Dan was talking about Vortex skin suits. Have you gone there yet?
Well, I was very fortunate when I raced on the track that we were supported by Vortex. So I have ridden in those skin suits, and so I'm aware of what it can do. And it has to be seen to be believed, because there's an element of when you see these pros saying, "Oh, I gained 5 watts in this, 10 watts in that." You sort of add it all up and go, "Well, you should be pedaling bike for free."
Yeah, no, that's how I just look at those guys. I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So you're telling me I can add 200 watts onto my threshold here? I can take the hour record.
So I mean, these things should never work cumulatively. Same as when people say, "Oh, well, if you take caffeine, beetroot, and bicarb, and you add them all together, it's the same thing." Once you start taking 3 things, they don't accumulate like that. But with the Vortex stuff, it's a very, very marginal win. If you had £6,000 to spend, I wouldn't be starting there. I think I've been fortunate that I've used it and I've seen the difference it can make, but also we've given them plenty of head-scratching moments where we've gone to them with a problem and said, "Can you make this suit faster?" And they've really struggled. So it's also so specific to the rider where you can't bank on a skin suit being fast on everyone. It's so specific to their body shape. And so we ended up in a scenario, for instance, where 4 of us in the team pursuit squad, and we all test a skin suit and it's fast on some of us and not others. And so I had to cut bits out of mine, for example, to make it on par with the rest of the guys. So it's just a real head scratcher, that one.
So you said if you had £6,000, you wouldn't spend it there. If you had £6,000, where would you spend it?
Everything else.
Assuming you have the bike already, you have the mainframe cockpit already sorted, wheels.
So, I mean, there's a great chart. I think Watchop have one, Aerocoach have one of like a pound per watt breakdown of where it's best, where you best get the most gains for your money. And so the one that's always overlooked is tires, for example. You definitely be starting there for your pound per watt.
So like what tires are you buying?
So at the moment, I've been running the GP5000 TTs. I think there's more scope and options now to have other TT tires. So originally, everyone was in Corsa Speeds. It was just the rolling resistance on them just outweighed any other benefit you were getting from other tires. Like at the time when those Corsa Speeds came out, I'm sure there was 3 or 4 watt difference to the GP5000 at the time, which was just a road race tire. And so you're just throwing away watts. Whereas now there's an element of the rolling resistance and also the aerodynamic profile with the wheel. So and different yaw angles when you're actually riding. So I'm not an expert on that. I think Dan will have far more expertise on that. But personally, I've been running the GP5000 TTs.
Tubeless?
Yeah.
And does the amount of, or the brand of sealant, does that give a rolling resistance difference?
I'm not aware of it. I'm not sure. I wouldn't Yeah, I wouldn't like to say. I don't know, but
Okay.
I'm assuming not. I know
Right.
that if you go tubeless or latex tubes, you're in a similar ballpark. But as soon as you start putting a butyl tube in there, you're just diminishing a lot of the effect.
Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than Huel. Huel has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. Huel is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. Huel Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like tapioca, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part is the flavors. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavors. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get Huel directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the Huel website, huel.com/roadman. Okay, so where are you going next for your gains for that 6,000 pounds?
So, I mean, if you could get not a wind tunnel test, but a track test, I would say, certainly. And they quite often, if you go to Watch Shop or another one of these providers, where they'll have equipment you can test, so they'll have helmets there, they'll have different skin suit options, they'll have overshoe options, and so that would be the first place I would go after you've optimized things like your tires and your chain and things like that, to actually test variables. So if I say to you, okay, a big chain ring, that works for everyone. So get a big single chain ring, do it away your front neck, get a wax chain, like oversized pulley wheels. They don't need tested. You don't need to go to a velodrome and test those to know they work. Whereas your other elements, your skin suits, helmets, overshoes, calf guards, hand positions, bar position, all those things can be tested at a velodrome or one of these, or a wind tunnel. So that would where I would primarily go.
And what about Cockpit? Because it's an expensive one to change out, and a lot of people are buying the bike with the Cockpit kind of pre-installed. If you're looking at a Canyon or a Factor Hanzo or any of these, would you be saying to someone, buy a frame and get a cheap Cockpit and go to one of these testing sessions and then figure out which Cockpit you need and then pull the trigger on it?
I probably would. I mean, that's what I've done. Is I paid no attention to the Cockpit when I bought the bike because I knew I was going to fine tune it with custom bars. It does open you up to the fact that you are going to spend more money down the line, but it does seem like a necessity because as adjustable as these bikes are, for instance, I've got a Cervelo P5 and the Cockpit it comes with, there's an adjustable riser for the bar tilt, so I can have 5, 10, 15 degrees if I want. There's a bit of toe in, toe out of the skis, and there's adjustability up and down, but it's still not a solid platform or adjustable beyond 15 degrees, or there's an element to how narrow you can get as well. So it's not perfect. The stock setups are a lot better than they used to be, but it's still not perfect. So there's an element for
there's nearly a market for someone to bring out a shitty, cheap, we'll call it a disposable aero bar that you can buy, stick on the bike, get the position dial, and then go and buy the fancy Cockpit.
Well, I guess that's what you can do with the stock setup. And then also, I know there must be cheaper solutions coming out eventually. It just can't go on like that forever, I don't imagine. But you're right that you want to get the position set first before you start investing in the custom stuff, because a lot of custom things, if you take a bar, for example, there's no adjustability in that.
So the stuff that's like kind of generic, that just works regardless. It's the big chain ring, single speed, oversized jockey wheels, tires. What else am I missing in that it doesn't need testing?
No, I think that's about those things. I mean, in terms of wheels, again, they're not going to be specific to the rider. You're going to know a fast set of wheels is going to be a fast set of wheels. Maybe they're slightly specific to the course, but I think most general public don't need to worry about that.
And then you're testing, so you wouldn't buy helmets, speed suits, gloves, calf guards, shoe covers, aero socks. You would go and get all that tested.
I think that's the safest way to go. If you had a bank of £6,000 and you knew you could spend it all, if you didn't have that and you had to gamble, then you go with reputable brands, because that's all you can do. But I would say, if in terms of what you're looking at, skin suit, certainly helmet, skin suit first. Then you start looking into your overshoes and calf guards. I think there's lots to be found in overshoes and things like that, but more so in helmets and skin suits. But the problem with a helmet is you're gambling, because I've tested so many helmets over the years, and it's just not a one size fits all.
Yeah, I have chatted to a couple of people that have spent a lot of time to wind tunnel, and they fully agree with you. They were saying if you were to buy a helmet and you didn't have a possibility to ever aero test it, probably the Giro Arrowhead and the Casque Bambino, they seem to be the fastest helmet on quite a lot of people.
Okay, I would have said the Casque Mistral maybe slightly better.
Sorry, I meant the Casque Mistral, yeah.
Okay, I think those slightly, they fill a lot of gap in the shoulders. Even if you move your head position, there's no tail to interrupt the flow. And as a general rule, the Casque Mistral in particular, I've seen just everyone gets a reasonable result in that, even if it's not the best helmet they test.
Yeah.
And for me, it's the same. It's not. I ride the Pop, for example, but the difference between that and the Casque Mistral isn't massive. I mean, it wouldn't. I don't wear it, but it wouldn't be. If I was sponsored by them, it wouldn't be a total deal breaker.
So let's fast forward to race day. What's your warm up protocol?
I'm on the camp of keeping it very minimal, so 20 to 25 minutes, and I will do a gradual ramp starting from noodling. That ramp will be about 8 to 10 minutes, starting from noodling up to towards zone 3 effort, and it will finish off with doing 2 minutes above LT1, so you're talking like maybe 350 to 360 watts, 2 minutes there, a minute in zone 4, right at threshold, so 95, 100% threshold, and then a 30-second effort above that. So you're talking like a 10-minute ramp where 2 minutes in tempo, 1 minute threshold, 30 seconds in VO2, and then I'll dial back a bit, and then take 2 or 3 minutes easy, and then do 2 15-second high cadence rev outs, which will be high power just by function of the cadence I'm doing, but it'll be something around 15 seconds at 550 to 600 watts, but just going at 115, 120 RPM or more, and then that'll be it for me.
And obviously you're racing in the UK and Scotland quite a bit. Heat dissipation isn't as big a factor as some people that are, racing in velodromes on the continent. Do you still warm up in an ice vest, or do you still drink slushies and stuff on the way to races?
I've not. I think you're right. It's definitely an impact to it. And so if it's, if you're abroad, for sure, you need to be doing that stuff. And if you're in summer, that one of these summers we have here occasionally where you get a day it's in the high 20 degrees, you definitely want to be approaching it that way. And if you're on the velodrome, you want to approach it that way. So in the past, I've used ice vests. I didn't know about the slushy thing when I was racing in 2019 or whatever it was. I mean, that stuff, technology's been around, but I just wasn't that aware of it. So I didn't do that. But ice vest for sure, I've tried over the years and would recommend a fan if you can plug a fan in. So I've got, for example, in the back of my car, there's a cigarette lighter with an adapter in it, and so I can put a normal plug into my car and use I use a Kicker Turbo Trainer to warm up, but I could put a fan in there if I wanted to, and I'd recommend the fan if it is hot, because keeping cool is important, like you say.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And then we get into, so we're actually into the start gate now. What's your pacing strategy? How hard are you going to get up to speed? And then what determines how you're going to pace this 10-mile effort?
So I use online tools as my windsock, is best bike split. You can take your pick, and I like to put the GPX file in there, model the course with what variables I've got in terms of the weather, my equipment, my physiology, what my threshold is, how far I want to go over my threshold. And so I put that into the model and see what it spits out as the optimal pacing plan if I was just a robot. And then I sort of accommodate for that and say, okay, well, it's asking me to go 20% over threshold here. I know that if I do that, I will need a full recovery afterwards, and it's not giving me that. So let's ignore that, or let's dial that down a bit. And I sort of adjust it and tweak it, finesse it. But so I get in the gates, and you want to get up to speed quickly. You want to accelerate fast, but you don't want to be an all-out effort. And some people, that will naturally take them longer, and I'm one of those people where if you put me in a group of 100 people, I will take, I'll be in the first percentile of people that take ages to speed up. I just don't have that physiology. But I am trying to get up to speed quickly. You want to spend a lot of energy getting up to speed and then cruising and holding it there. And so then you're looking at things like hills, descents, and corners, and saying, okay, if there's a hill coming up, it's all very well saying, well, the gravity force is a lot more important than the air resistance at that point. Therefore, it's more beneficial to you to put power in or put more power into the hills or energy into the hills than on the downhills. But you have to realize that if you go above threshold for a hill, there needs to be a section where you go below threshold. You have to counterbalance it, because if you go above threshold up every hill and don't go below it, you'll never recover, and that you just blow. So there's certain hills, for example, if I know it drags over the top, or you're not getting another recovery for 5 minutes, then that hill has to be above threshold, but to a point where I can carry on afterwards. And similarly, if I hit, I know there's going to be 3 bends through this section, and I'm not going to be able to pedal very hard. I think, oh, that's going to be a recovery section. I need to go work hard before it and after it.
Interesting. I never would approach corners like that even.
Yeah, I mean, because ultimately there's only so much. When you hit a corner at 55k an hour on a TT bike, it's scary. And there's also an element of the fact you're in such a mindset of not losing any speed that you take them very aggressively. Whereas when you're in a road race and the peloton's moving through, everyone's looking out for each other up to a point where you just cruise through the corners, and there's not, unless it's a crit, you're not railing them. Whereas on a TT bike, there's no one to follow, so you're setting your own pace, and you're at 55k an hour. You don't really want to be pulling the brakes because it's a lot of speed or a lot of energy to get back up to speed. So you want to say, right, this is my chance to recover because the energy is better placed elsewhere. So let's try and not use the brakes, try and float through this freewheeling, and then use it where it matters.
So pre-riding is obviously important for that, because then you aren't going to have to get up to speed after that corner because you can carry 55k an hour through the corner. But if it was a dead stop corner where you had to get back up to speed after the corner, you might dial that back a bit more before you're going into the corner.
Yeah, I think certainly if it's a corner where you're braking heavily and you have to accelerate back out afterwards, you'll also have an element of freewheeling into it. So you're going to get a recovery regardless. And like you say, when you come out of it, you're having to burst up to speed. I think it's just that's where race simulations practice, those elements come into it, and realizing how hard can I go and then still drop into threshold afterwards. And so you can do structured intervals towards that. A very common one that people like to do is, something like 3 or 4 by 8 minutes, where the first minute is VO2 and then you drop into 7 minutes of threshold. And that gives you that element of, you put that lactate in the system and then you've got to sit and hold it at threshold and just endure it. And so that's an element of, that's kind of what it's like.
And for a 10-mile time trial, how do you approach? 10-mile time trial starts at, we say, 11 o'clock in the morning. How are you approaching breakfast that morning, gels, caffeine leading into it, and fueling, if any, during the 10-miler?
So because I'm doing 15 hours a week, for me, that's a relatively high volume. And so I like to have a carbohydrate load the day before. And that might not apply to everyone. If you're doing 6 or 8 hours a week, you just might not need that. You've got enough rest days in the week where you're not glycogen empty at all and you wouldn't benefit from it. But personally, I do. And then the morning of the race, I'll need to eat at least 2.5 to 3 hours beforehand. I'm somebody that gets, I'm sort of self-diagnosed this, but like rebound hypoglycemia, where if I eat too close to activity, I will get this insulin sort of rebound where I go hypoglycemic during a warm-up.
Yawning and stuff?
No, worse. I get lightheaded, very dizzy, shaky, like you are bonking.
Okay.
So I like to eat a minimum of 2.5 hours beforehand, and then, that would just be carbohydrate focused. That's purely it. You're eating white processed goods, and it's not healthy, but that's the way it is. And caffeine, again, I know a lot of people that take 3-6 milligrams per kilogram, and that's the recommended dose. And so I don't actually fall into that. I take about 150 milligrams, which is probably 2 milligrams per kilogram, or even less than that, just because I get this hypoglycemic effect again, where if I have too much, I get shakes and anxiety, and it doesn't help me. That's what I do for the caffeine.
Do you want caffeine gum or anything like that during the race?
No. So I have a coffee in the morning, and then maybe like a 50 milligram caffeine pill at some point in the hour leading into the race. But the caffeine gum is good. I like to use that if I'm stuck in a pinch somewhere and I've not had coffee that morning, or it's crap coffee or whatever it is. But caffeine gum, yeah, for sure, rate it like that. Bicarb is another one which I've used over the years. I'm not a fan of it, but if it was my A race and I really wanted to dial everything in, then I probably would use that. Beetroot's another one.
Nitrates, I was going to ask, just for A races?
Yeah, purely because the effect is just so unpleasant. It's just one of those things where I just don't really want to use it if I don't have to. It's a real. I guess I've not tried the new Morton products, so I don't know how that rolls. But the ways I've done it in the past I can't remember the coating. It's esoteric, a coating that helps you absorb it through the gut. So you take these pills, and it's helped to improve digestion. And I'm sure it's fine, but you're still swallowing 30 pills. And it's there is a bubbling in the stomach. You're burping a lot. You're nervous. You're having to look for the nearest toilet. Just the kind of thing you don't want to be doing.
Yeah, I've done on the track. It's miserable. And in terms of, you wouldn't take a gel during a 10 miler?
Not during. No. The last gel I would take would be during the warm up. So about 10 minutes into the warm up, I would take a gel.
And for a 25 miler?
No.
You wouldn't eat either in 25? Nothing?
No, I'm not.
So it's only taking you 45 minutes.
Yeah. Up until recently, I was doing 50s without a gel as well. So what I would say for that is, I've done the carbohydrate load the day before. I'm coming in eating well fueled. I should have enough just to get through 90 minutes. But definitely, I know I'm risking it at that point. But with a 25 miler, for example, I'm not taking my hands off the bars to take a gel. There's no way I'm not doing that. But at 50, I would, for average person, I would definitely recommend it. Yeah.
And so that's if everything goes well. So if you're in the start gate, you get up to speed, you're halfway in, you're looking down at the parameter, you have the battle plan, and you're like, shit, this isn't, like, I'm not on this pace. I can't hold my best bike's place to spit out something here that whatever happens, cortisol levels, sleep that night, I just don't have those power in the leg today. How do you think about adjusting the strategy and not totally throwing the rattle out of the pram?
I think the closest experience I've had to that kind of thing is when the parameters has not worked at all. And so, like, you come out of the gate,
going to Worlds this year as well, actually.
Yeah. It's always at high profile events. So I've had one at the national championships where it's died. I've had it at the world championships where it's died. And I think it's to do with the signals or whatever else is going on at the event. But anyway, so you start the event, power's not working, and you go, right, what do I do now? And you have to dial into RPE and sensations. And so if your parameter is reading something you don't want to see, and it's saying, you've not got it in you today, you've got to take the optimistic view and say, well, maybe it's wrong. And so let's dial into RPE. And I know how RPE feels. It's not that far wrong, actually. I mean, there's plenty of times where I've had dodgy parameters, but you've got to take that attitude and say, right, RPE is this. Let's ride to that. And I know this has to feel below threshold on this descent. This has to feel at threshold on the flat, and it has to feel above threshold on the climb, and work to those RPE scales.
I love that. I'm going to start doing that in training spins now. Like, that parameter's wrong. I'm motoring. Mine's been wrong for a few years, I think.
I've lived in group chats and atmospheres over the years. Whenever you set a power PB, someone goes, that's overreading, mate. What are you talking about? It's just...
But everyone has one or two friends that their parameter's wrong, because you ride with them and you're like, you're getting dropped at like 60% of the power you were saying you can hold.
Yeah, it's a sad fact of life that these things still can't be precise in that sense, or rather, you can accept 1 or 2%, but when someone's got one that's just way out, you go, what's going on
here? Just to finish up, where do you think you can get your biggest improvements now? Because you're in a state of chasing seconds, if not milliseconds.
So I guess for me, it's some of the other aspects, like you say, if it's nutritional intervention like the bicarb, if it's the things like heat training, if it's smaller equipment gains, and also something for me that I'm looking at over the winter is strength training. So it's something that I've put on the back burner over the last few years. I did it a lot in the past and I hated it. I don't enjoy it at all, but I did see a benefit from it. And so now I'm going to try look back into that in terms of improving, well, not just my muscular power, but that top end, whereby if I have to do 500 watts up a climb, it's not maximal effort, it's still within my capacity. Have you played around with heat adaptive training? I've not, and it seems like there's a lot of people having good experience with that, and there's definitely a lot of studies and literature around it, and it's becoming very well known now how beneficial it is, not just for climatization, but actually general normal room temperature. Yeah, I had a guy, Russ McGraw, on the podcast. He's one of the founders of Core Body Temperature. It's actually worth going back and listening to it. His claim, now obviously it's you need to take it with a pinch of salt because it's a totally biased claim, but he thinks the response from heat training is more predictable than the response from altitude training. Altitude training can go totally pear-shaped. It's amazing, but if you're playing on that fine line where you don't have enough red blood cells or raw byproducts to create those red blood cells going into the altitude block, it can go totally pear-shaped and you can come out of it worse. Whereas heat training elicits pretty consistent gains for people across the board, is his claim. That's interesting. Yeah, I know that if you go to altitude and you've not got enough iron and you don't eat well enough, then you're going to put yourself in a hole. Yeah, I've seen people glue to the road after altitude training. I've done altitude. I've never done a proper block. I've done 2 weeks in altitude in stints, but never a proper 3-week block. So I don't have a fair representation of it. But heat training I've not tried at all, and it does seem it has or there's not going to be a negative effect from it. Like you say, it's at least always going to be positive.
Yeah, John, I've really enjoyed this. I'm going to be tracking your times next year and painfully comparing my slow drudgery to your Formula One, like 10 milers.
I'll look forward to seeing the results.
See you later, mate.
See you. Cheers.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. And click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.